Welcome to another UTS Startups Confessions. Welcome. It's great to be here. It's great to have everyone here. And we've got a very special set of guests here today. Normally at UTS Startups Confessions, and as part of this series, we often hear about software products. Here and there, we rarely see the physical product, so it's been a little while since we've done that. So we've got Abhi here, and we've got Shrey. Please give a big round of applause to welcome them. To talk about Nullarbor Watch Company. So gentlemen, before we dive too deep, I just want you to tell us, what is Nullarbor Watch Company?
So we are a Aussie watchmaking company that draws its inspiration from the Aussie outback, society and culture, and our goal is to be the flagship watch of Australia.
Wonderful. Yeah. Now, my name is Aaron, by the way. I'm the inspiration manager here at UTS Startups, and we'll be going through and we'll be exploring, some of the path and the journey that the team has gone through, what's enabled their success, what's been some of the challenges. And after the live stream part of the interview, we'll be switching in the cameras off. I'll be going to the audience for the uncensored, unhinged, whatever you like to ask Q&A, followed by UTS Startups, a weekly social networking session, and the best wood-fired pizza in Sydney. So stay tuned for that. And if you're watching online, make sure that you come along in person for that next time. But before we dive in, I want to ask both of you, who were you before you started this company?
You want to?
Yeah, so my name's Abhi. I used to work at UTS in the Protospace lab. So I'm a graduate from here as well. I studied mechanical engineering and applied physics, and then really wanted to get into automotive engineering. I graduated end of 2019. And we all know what happened in 2020. So the move to London got put aside, and then I went straight into 3D printing. And I think that's really set me up quite nicely to help design and lead the engineering side of this part of the business. And yeah, Shrey and I have been friends since school, so I'll let Shrey.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the nice intro there, Aaron, as well. So my name is Shrey. I also am a UTS graduate. I studied science and IT with a major in business. I graduated few years before Abhi did, because I think he did a double degree. But growing up, I've always had a passion with business. I always wanted to start my own company. For some reason, I didn't like working for people. I always wanted to do my own thing. But I've also had a thing for technology as long as I can remember. It's something that's driven me into the career that I have now. So at the moment, I work in an insurance organization and I manage a technology team. So that business and IT sort of lens is something that I've always wanted to do and further sort of progress. Where this sort of came into play was I love watches for as far as I can remember. If you look at my old baby photos, I've always got a watch on. And I don't know why. I used to wear it on my right hand because my grandfather used to wear it on his right hand. But at some point in time, I've shifted to my left hand. But I don't know, that sort of love and the expression of one's ability to talk about themselves and moments that matter are watches for me, right? My now wife gave me a watch for our engagement. So it's, I often connect watches to special parts in my life. And, that's where we sort of clicked. We were friends in school, and we lived together in COVID as well. And, one thing led to another, and that's where we've come from, really.
Great. So it sounds like there's this engineering, wanting to go into automotive, scrap that 3D printing, combined with this business and IT, managing a technology team, and you were living together during COVID.
Yes.
Was that where the idea for Nullarbor started?
Yeah.
Tell us about that process.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Yeah, so basically, Shrey comes to me one day and he's like, I want to make a watch. Do you know how to do that? And I said, yeah, we can figure it out. I'll learn the key skill that I learned at university, which was how to YouTube things. So I went to YouTube and I figured out how to make a watch. And initially, the process was sourcing components from online, different places, and we made a couple of custom watches for ourselves. After that, our friends were like, oh, that's awesome. Can you make one for me? Can you make one for, my friends and stuff like that? And so that's sort of how we got started during COVID, making watches. So it was just a bit of a passion project, which eventually sort of, snowballed into Nullarbor.
Absolutely. Hands up, by the way, if during COVID, during the lockdowns, you were similar to myself, really bored. Hands up. Yeah, hands up if you wish that you could have actually turned it into something like this. Hands up. That's pretty spectacular. And, making watches like when I think about making watches, especially the fancier ones, I'll get you to talk a bit about the watches in a moment. It doesn't occur to me like a straightforward process.
Yeah.
How did that journey, what were some of the challenges as part of that?
Yep.
Was YouTube sufficient? Like, Australia is not necessarily known for being a watchmaking nation, if you like. So it's pretty spectacular that you're doing this as an Australian, owned and Australian designed company.
Yeah, no, you're right. Australia doesn't have a lot of history in watchmaking, and as an industry, it's a dying art here, especially. It's why you often go to get a watch serviced or even look at watches that are made here, and your options are very limited. Even the luxury brands like Omega and Rolex have moved their manufacturing and servicing facilities out of Australia now back to their home countries. So you're right in that sense. YouTube is very good, right? It's free learning basically, and we utilize the hell out of it in building those watches. The first few that we made, as Abhishek mentioned, we took about 8 hours to put together. It's very intricate. You got to get all the little tools. I wear glasses, so you got to put a little loop thing on your eyes. It's very finicky to look deep into the components and how to precisely put that all together. So the first one took us about 8 hours. The next one was 6 hours. And we were like, yeah, we can do this, but one, the quality is not where we want it to be.
Yep.
And it's just taking us a long, long time to put together. So, it was very challenging to begin with, but yeah, YouTube was pretty sufficient in that front. But, having him working in a 3D sort of prototyping space and having an engineering background made it that much easier for us, because he understood the terminology, what was being spoken about, a little bit better than I did for sure. But yeah, as you mentioned, like, it was a lot of that passion that was driving us to sort of overcome some of those challenges.
We also didn't build the movement from the ground up. We brought an off-the-shelf movement and then assembled. Yeah. So I don't want to claim that we've come up with something that's reinventing the wheel or anything like that. So largely it was quite procedural, but even in that process, there's finicky things that can go wrong and things you got to replace and things like that. So yeah.
And you've just mentioned the movement. Is that a technical term for a component of the watch? Why don't you tell us a bit about the product?
Yeah. So
and what's gone into it? And we've got some fantastic ones here as well, which I don't know if everyone here who's in person, you'll get a chance to try them on and see how they look. And online, we've got them there. Do you want to tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, I might talk about the technical side of things. So a movement is essentially what's powering the watch. You have three main movement types. You have a quartz, which is a battery, an automatic, which is what we have in here, which has got a rotor placed at the back of it, so it charges when you're walking, or perpetual motion. And then you have a manual movement, so think your grandfather clocks, right? They run on a wind. So over here, we have a Japanese-made movement. It's Citizen is the overarching company that builds that movement. I'm sure a lot of you may have heard of that as a brand. So they offer a number of different lines of off-the-shelf movements, and Miyota is one of them. So it's the 9000 series, which is one of the highest sort of premium series collections. So it's often regarded as like the Swiss level movements in Japan. You want to talk about the product? Or
the movement is what powers the watch. It's automatic. I think these days people are starting to move back to that analog feel, with mid-century furniture and all those types of retro things. It's sort of come full circle with smartwatches. People are starting to get sick of them. They want to go back to the basics in a way. So especially for guys, we don't have a lot of things we can accessorize with. So watches are sort of starting to come back. And during COVID, a lot of the big brands saw a huge markup in price. And so that sort of post-COVID world, people are starting to talk about this sort of stuff a lot. And so, that's how we sort of came up with the idea to maybe do a brand, and we had a whole bunch of design inspirations. We weren't too sure how far you take it, how wild you get with it. We really wanted to make the best watch possible, but then we were consulting with Murray, the director of startups, quite often, and Murray was all about time to market. So we sort of, dialed back on our ambitions and tried to make something that was a balance of a good watch, which had a lot of the features that we wanted as enthusiasts, but also something that we could make and sell and build a business on.
Yeah. I mean, the brand itself, like Abhishek was saying, is really connecting with Australia and what that means to us, right? We're not from here originally. We're first-gen immigrants. So for us, it means vastly something different to what it might mean for you all. So we didn't want to lean too heavily on, what Australia is. You could put a kangaroo on the watch, for example. It's kind of cheesy. We wanted to reflect on the outdoors and the culture and society, because that's what it means to us. So you got the three different colors. You got the outback brown, which links to the outback. You've got the ocean blue, which is like the water that surrounds us, and the rainforest green for like the tropics. Australia is such a vibrant and different country, and it's got all of these little things within it. And we wanted to showcase that to everyone, really. Whether you're a watch enthusiast or just a general person wearing a watch, we wanted you to wear Australia's watch.
Wow. And as you've been going through that process and starting to build up that brand, in the space of watches, like over the past 10, 15 years, you've had like companies like Daniel Wellington trying to go, hey, we're going to make these fantastic watches very affordable. And, that's copped a lot of criticism in terms of the actual quality. And then also there's been a lot of like online campaigns and different things where they've been selling watches which are supposed to be extremely good quality but haven't turned out to be. How have you found working within that niche? Has that been impacted you, or what do you do to make sure that you actually are really demonstrating and showcasing the actual quality?
You just got to put in your due diligence. A lot of it with hardware products is capital intensive, so you got to put the money in to go through different suppliers and find out whether what they're making is good enough. You got to try and test it. When you're trying to bootstrap a startup, it's hard to do that. So you have to try and do the best you can to mitigate the risks. We definitely didn't want to go the Daniel Wellington route. We're watch enthusiasts, so we really didn't want to, get a watch that is, by and large, sort of lower quality perhaps, and package it through the branding. We wanted to sort of walk that line and have a good quality product and also work on the branding as well. So it's tough, but we think we've done a pretty good job. Mm-hmm. We really wanted to make a watch that we would wear. And I think at the end of all of this, success or failure, we've got a couple of watches we can wear. So we're happy with that. And
the other thing is like we went through like 4 stages of prototyping. So we looked at different manufacturers and what quality they were producing. It was kind of an A/B test situation where you'd give a design to a manufacturer, look at their quality, their service offering, see what they're bringing back to you, and then take that away. You either like it or you don't, and then you may take that one to another supplier and you compare and contrast in what's working well. So this is like the 4th supplier we landed on. And then we've done a number of iterations with the same supplier to check, are they consistently providing a good product, what their service levels are like, what their lead times are like, are they in respect to what they're saying truthful? So a lot of those things are capital intensive because it's a hardware product, and COVID doesn't help, right? We had instances where the factories were shut down, shipping lanes are impacted. There's a lot of going back and forth and making sure that the supplier you're working with is not only just a supplier, but they're providing you a good product, but also that experience with them is better, because at the end of the day, that's going to have an impact to who your customers are and their experience with the watch. But in terms of the whole market, like watches are like a $60-70 billion market last year, and they're growing at like 4.5% annually. So it's a big space to operate in. There are a lot of number of different players in the market. So you kind of have to provide that, difference. And for us, that's our story, that's our brand, and a couple of little things here and there with the watches. And we have some great ideas after the launch of this one. But like as Abhishek was saying, it's a fine line you have to walk as your first release. You want to entice customers to buy into your product and your brand, but at the same time, you want to try something different.
And just on, you mentioned that the watch market's like a really large market, and especially when you see watches out there at a similar price point to yours, it's easy to ask questions about like what the profit margins are like and things. Are you able to share, what kind of margin do you get to make on these? Is it significant? It's kind of a semi-luxury or luxury
So I mean, the price point is a luxury price point. We're aiming to retail them at around $950 to $1,000. We're going to launch at a much cheaper price. I think our launch discounts are around 35 to 40%. That's generally the Kickstarter model of doing business. You incentivize people by discounting or by offering them more features or more add-ons and stuff, sort of packaging something together. Our focus has always been from the get-go to make a watch that we want to wear and to build a brand that we're proud of. So we're keeping our margins as low as we can so that we can get people on board and then, set up a brand that's, got the values that we sort of want to represent. So each watch contributes to conservation in each of those areas. So we're working with Tangaroa Blue for the ocean blue. We're working with Wilderness Society on the Rainforest Green, and then working with the Australian Wildlife Conservancy for the outback brown. So setting that thing up it's hard when we're not making any money at the moment, right? It's been a money pit because we haven't launched yet. Right, the Kickstarter campaign will launch next week, and then after that, we'll hopefully have some cash flow and we'll hit our goals. But we really wanted to set the base up properly so that if we execute right, we then have 2-3 watches down the road, we have the ability to make that money back. Which I think Shrey mentioned as being the Richard Branson approach.
Realistically, that's the sort of business model we wanted to adopt, which was what Richard Branson sort of did when he first started out. Is you want to bring in a customer, you want to create a customer base, you want to create a brand presence, and you will do that by offering a good product at a reduced margin. So our margins are like 20-25%. They're not way out there. Like Daniel Wellington's margins are like 300%. So there is a lot of wiggle room, but we wanted to develop, I guess, the first line for it to have that brand presence. We want to build our customer base and take them on a journey with us in developing something that's, Australians are proud of talking to or, wearing. And then later on, as the brand grows, you can adopt and change your business model to have higher margins because it's there. The margin is there to be had. We just don't need to offer a 40% discount, so.
Right. Now, often a lot of what people who are watching and who attend these sessions want to know, how did you get through the challenging time? So I'm just imagining both of you, you were there in COVID. Shrey, you go up to Abhi and you say, hey, how do you make a watch? And there's that initial excitement. Were there moments where you started to think, let's not do this anymore? What were those ups and downs like? And because you already mentioned shipping, factories closing down, people getting COVID. What was that like for the both of you?
I think there's a whole bunch of different things, right? Like people not believing in your vision about starting an Aussie watch brand.
Hold on. So you mean that when you told people you were building a watch company, they weren't immediately like
flawed? Yeah, exactly.
They're like, great. Oh no.
And it's not any of the buzzwords. We're not working in big data. We're not working in artificial intelligence. We're not working in all these types of IoT or anything like that. I've got some ideas, but at the moment we're not doing anything like that. So it's a really, really weird niche to try and start a company up in 2023. But the driving force was our passion and our desire to, we saw that there was a gap in the market. When you think about watches in Australia, there's a couple of companies out there that are making some good products, but by and large, no one can really name them for you unless you're a real watch nerd, right? So we want to, slot in right there. We want to try and be, that RM Williams or that Qantas type brand. So, there's a whole bunch of space, and I think that's really been driving us. We've had a whole bunch of setbacks.
I think one of the key ones that stuck out to me when you asked that question was, we launched the brand. We were probably going to do this about a year ago, and we had this whole brand deck, everything set in stone. And through connections with Murray, he said, go and talk to a nameless marketing agency, and just get their feedback. Now, we're very thankful for that, because the CEO took out almost 2 hours of his time to sit with us and talk to us and discover what we wanted to do and give us suggestions. But no sugarcoating it. He tore us apart. He was like, this is shit. This is not going to resonate. You've got no connection between your brand, your logo, your product. What you're saying is awesome, but what I'm seeing is not. So I remember it very clearly. I drove to this meeting and we walked outside of the meeting and we kind of just stood at the car like, shit, what do we do? And we sat in the car, and it was like a 25-minute drive back home, and not a single word was spoken. And we were so deflated, like we didn't really know what to do or where to go. But then you kind of take that as a blessing in disguise, and you say, okay, this person kind of knows what he's talking about. He's running a successful marketing agency. Let's go back to the drawing board. And we did that, and we built it again from the ground up. Like all the collateral you see here wasn't this polished, you know. And then we looked into building a brand that's connecting with the product itself. And there weren't two separate things. We realized it has to be a cohesive thing, the brand and the product itself. So that was one challenge. I don't know, like that for me, it was like that moment was like, what do we do here? Like I was so deflated.
Yeah. So that covers it pretty nicely.
And you mentioned that the passion, and you've both mentioned this a few times, the passion has been something that's driven you. What advice do you have to people, or what can you reflect on that you've learned about stoking and maintaining that passion? Is it always there? Is it always high? What's the realities of building that up? And what would you say to people who are still discovering or looking for what they're passionate about?
Just try. Even if you're not super passionate about it, you'll learn about 10 different new things. You might fail the first time. You know, we definitely did on our first try at starting the brand. So, but you know, if you don't give it a go, you don't learn those things. And a lot of those things you can read a book, but then you don't know how you work compared to that book about startups or lean processes or agile processes or whatever. So you've got to figure out how you work and how you get things done. And I think we've both done that together. But I wouldn't. Yeah, I'd say if you're at uni, or if you've got the opportunity where your job is, you know, not too crazy, and you want to pursue a startup or something like that, you just got to go and do it, because you're not going to learn anything without doing it. Like you've got to try.
Yeah, and we're still friends at the end of it till now, so that's always a plus.
Yeah, something worked out. So.
Absolutely. So, you know, imagine 3 to 5 years into the future, if things are going as smoothly, or like all the things, you know, challenges included, are going how you'd want them to go, what does Nullarbor Watch Company look like in 3 to 5 years?
So, you know, the one thing is everyone here in this room would be wearing a Nullarbor watch. But, you know, like I was saying to you earlier, this is our first line. What we want to do is transition from here into more bespoke sort of products that are more Australian. So at the moment, you know, a lot of these things in this package are not made here. Effectively, what we want to do is in-source a lot of that as much as possible. So, you know, a simple thing as Abhishek had a great idea where we could use local artists to design the NATO straps here and make them here, or we could use things like kangaroo leather, which is a bit more sustainable and local. You know, so drive the brand into more of an Australia sort of focus, but then also pivot and shift depending on what the market is doing. We don't want to be quite set in our ways. You know, if the market's moving into an apparel sort of space, then we need to adapt to try to stay afloat, because, you know, whilst we were doing our research, there are a number of different Australian brands that do watches, and they've set themselves into this sort of ecosystem. And during COVID, a lot of them failed because they failed to adapt to what the market was saying. But, you know, in 3 to 5 years, I would love for this to be my full-time job. I leave my insurance company behind and focus on this, you know, I'll run this into a full-fledged business would be my sort of 3 to 5 year.
Yeah, I think the market's definitely there. Shrey mentioned, I think, $60 billion for watches. 1% of that would be awesome. Even 0.5% would be pretty amazing, which is big dreaming. But, you know, I think in 3 to 5 years, you know, more brand awareness. You know, maybe we're pushing into RM stores. I'd love to be able to have a little concession somewhere in an RM store, and people thinking about Nullarbor when they think about watches in Australia. And like Shrey said, I'd love to be able to, you know, start making this more of a full-time commitment. I'm an engineer, so how do I make this into a smartwatch? How do I 3D print watches? How do I bring reshore manufacturing, like Shrey said? You know, UTS has all this access to the proto space, to all these really cool resources that we could use. And it just makes it so much easier to tap into tech that costs $300,000, $400,000, which I wouldn't be able to afford otherwise. But I can go in and, you know, maybe print watches out of metal. So, you know, I'd really love to start pushing those points of interest into this project, and then, you know, hopefully start putting those buzzwords in, because we don't have any at the moment. So, you know.
So AI watch.
Watch GPT.
Yeah, watch GPT,
yeah.
That's it, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Look, we've got time for one more thing, and you mentioned that you've got your launch next week. I believe you said Tuesday is when the Kickstarter campaign launches. Everyone here in the room, I believe, has a flyer and a QR code conveniently and strategically placed on their chairs. And we'll put the link there online for people to look. But we've also got the launch event or launch party on Thursday. Just tell everyone who's watching and telling everyone in the room, what's the best way for them to find out or get involved, or potentially, if they like, start participating in the Australian watch movement?
We're launching. We're going to have another event here. It's going to be less about us. I think people have heard a lot from us about the watches. So we've worked with local artists to put these box linings together. It's a bespoke artwork. We can't pull them out. I think it's quite a tight package, but we've got some behind. We should have really had some prepared. But we're going to have those artists come up and talk about how they connected with the watch, what they thought of when they were coming up with the packaging, and hear from the people we've collaborated with. So bring everyone together into a room, and we'll be giving away some cool things. So just generate some hype, and hopefully see that launch be a bit successful.
And the people that are online and not in the room, I guess we've got a pretty good social presence at the moment. We both like posting, and whether or not we like it or not, we are posting a lot. Our Instagram handle is Nullarbor Watch, but you can also go to our website, which is nullarborwatch.com.au. So that's just one word, nullarborwatch.com.au. You can check us out there. We'll have a link to the Kickstarter, which launches Tuesday night, 9 p.m. for us Aussies. So you can head from our website to the Kickstarter or through our Instagram, whichever one you want. But we've also got the QR codes to the people in person here.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Well, look, in a moment, we're going to shift to the in-person, unrecorded Q&A. So for everyone who's watching online, thanks for being with us. Coven, I'd love to see you again next week, either online or in person, for the Best Wood-Fired Pizza in Sydney and networking with everyone here at UTS Startups. So once again, thank you, Shrey. Thank you, Abhi. Thank you, Nullarbor Watch Company, for joining us at UTS Startups Confessions this week. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.